So welcome everybody to not the first event of Global Entrepreneurship Week, but one of the first. My name is Jeff Bennett. I am the president of StartupSac. And this is a journey through the Sacramento startup ecosystem. If you're new to the Sacramento startup scene, we're going to take you on a guided tour through our ecosystem, exploring the journey that typical founders might take. Okay, a quick rundown of our agenda today. It's going to be most of the time is going to be spent with our field guide for today, Dan Casas-Murray. But after that presentation, we're going to have a little bit of time to hear some personal stories from a couple of founders who have joined us here today. And then we are going to wrap it up with some Q&A and have some final links and announcements as far as upcoming activities. So now I think it's time to turn things over to your field guide for the day, Dan Casas-Murray. Take it away, Mr. Lean Innovator.
All right, thank you very much. Hey everybody, I'm Dan, and I'm a entrepreneurship aficionado, obsessor. What up, Cameron? Uh, and anyways, I've been in the ecosystem since it began in 2000. Well, I think it was around 2012. I go back from overseas, from founding a company over there, and I came to Sacramento, and the startup scene was all on Meetup.com. And it was like coders over here, programmers over there, design folks over there. And, really in the last 9 years, it's really gotten a lot bigger, a lot greater focus. And it's gotten so big, in fact, that we need a map to kind of like keep track of all those little different nodes that are around and all the relationships that are in Sacramento. And so my purpose today is to show you a map that we use, that map that I just talked about, and I want to show you the like how to navigate it basically, because when you look at it, it seems pretty complex. There's lots of circles, there's lots of squares, there's lots of lines and different colors and stuff like that, and it's just sort of like overwhelming, like because it's an ecosystem, just like a spider's web, right? But there is a method to the madness, and that's what we're here to do today. We're going to unpack where you can find investors, where you can find co-founders, where you can learn how to do business stuff and startup stuff. And then we're going to talk about a typical journey that a startup founder can expect to take within the ecosystem. Okay, so if you have questions as I'm talking, feel free to put them in the chat. It's always better together, right? So let's talk while you're doing this. If you need a clarification or something like that, totally cool. And I know that my co-hosts will help me field some of those questions as we go along. With that said, what I'd like to do is explain this map from the eyes of my friend Mike. So this is Mike, and Mike is a person that worked at a technology company that created an app, and the app did well and gave him some runway. And at the end of it, he was like, you know what, this was really awesome. It was like a really like a really small app. I want to do something a lot bigger. And that's when he decided that, he's going to try to break out and everything like that. So he's an entrepreneur just like you, just like me, and he's in Sacramento, and he's heard about this cool network, and he wants to get in touch with it. So the next thing that he does is he rings up his friend Janice. Janice used to work at that tech company, but she left because she had her own thing that she was going to do. And he called her up and he's like, hey, how did you get started? She's like, well, I had to figure out like where the investors were, where to find co-founders, and where to like learn how to do business stuff. And Mike's like, that's awesome. I have an idea for an app already. I just need to know where the investors are so I can start pitching. And she's like, well, okay, they're in places in Sacramento. And Mike's like, you gonna tell me, Janice? Like, we're supposed to be sharing information here, right? And she's like, yeah, but you know what? They're gonna ask you some questions first. And he's like, I don't care about that. Just show me where they're at. So she's like, okay. So what she does is she shows them this ecosystem map, right? It's like we said, it's a bunch of colors and squares and circles and everything like that. So when you're looking at funding, you look at this map right here, you see that everything in green, green for money, right? That's where most of the folks with startup capital hang out. And when you click on one of these little links here, it'll take you to a page that will basically tell you about that particular node, right? So that's for Sac Angels. You'll find another one for Growth Factory. You'll find another one for Moneda, that kind of stuff, right? So Mike's like, well, that was great. I don't know what was so hard about all that. And she said, well, you know, it's a thing, right? Like you have to get like when you approach those folks, what's going to happen is they're going to start asking you questions. He's like, have them ask me my questions. I'm not afraid. And she's like, yeah, but these are like questions you're going to like need some like thoughtful responses to, right? And Mike's like, well, what kind? And she's like, well, they're going to ask you who your team is. They're going to ask you about like your minimum viable product, what that's going to look like. They're going to ask you about like, you know, what kind of traction you have. You might hear something called unit economics, financial projections, all those things, right? And Mike's like, oh, well, I just wanted to build an app, but okay. I guess I'll explore this a little more. And she's like, well, one of the first things that you got to do is find somebody to share the load with you because it's going to be a lot. Business stuff and building. I mean, that takes a lot of bandwidth. And he's like, but I don't have a co-founder right now. She's like, well, you kind of have to find one. And he's like, but where am I going to find a co-founder? Right? That's this discussion that actually like real life, real talk, that is a thing that comes up a lot in our community is where can we get co-founders? And Janice says, well, basically, look, you can use this map to actually start helping you find co-founders. And Mike's like, cool, tell me. Well, you come to this map right here, right? We already looked at the funding line. Now we're going to look at this other line right here, connect. Underneath the connect line, there's a bunch of events that happen under the umbrella of the startup ecosystem in Sacramento. So startup happy hour is one. 1 million cups is a weekly deal. It's in the morning. It's virtual, so you're in your living room for now, where you're hearing from entrepreneurs, you're networking with other entrepreneurs, that kind of stuff, right? And then there's also meetups, and then there's also programs where you can actually talk one-on-one with people at Mentor Sacramento. There's a newsletter called the Startup Digest where you can basically understand everything that's going on that week, right? Lots of different stuff. And again, just like the other thing, if you want to know about a particular resource, you hover over that link. So Mentor Sacramento, for example, and you can see that this is how you sign up to actually start seeing who's who that can help you with your particular questions, right? And so Mike is like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. I think maybe I could start going to events. Now all I need to do is start building, right? And she's like, well, yeah, but there's those business things we talked about, and he's like, what? She's like, like the financial projections, the unit economics, like the pitch deck, all those things, right? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, well, okay, so don't worry about that because there's also a line right here that'll show you like where you can actually go to learn all that stuff. And Mike's like, okay, so what kind of stuff? And she's like, come on, let me show you the map here again. So this map, or this line right here, educate, right? So it so happens that when you're doing business, right, you're asking, hey, can I sell it? Can I make it? And will it make money, right? And sometimes that's really hard to like understand whether or not that whole thing is going to work right away. But the great news is we have a lot of tools at our disposal in the ecosystem that can help us mitigate a lot of that risk up front. And this is where you find out how to use those tools that you already have. So here's an example of an education thing. So the Lean Innovator series is basically a customer development series. Basically helps you understand, this is my audience, this is how I know it's my audience, this is the proof that I have, these are the customers that are eventually going to buy from me, right? The Virtual Toolkit series is a series of workshops at the Carlson Center that walks you through how to construct a lean canvas. Basically getting to that place where you might have heard something like problem solution fit. That is where you go to start understanding that kind of stuff. SAC Entrepreneurship Academy is a close to a semester-long program where it's focused on helping you build a business plan. And then there's all these different other different nodes. If you're a food entrepreneur, then the Alchemist Micro Enterprise Academy is for you. If you're looking at just putting together business plans or just business basics, where do I go to like sign up for stuff, like admin things, right? What's the difference between an S corporation, an LLC, a C corporation, all that kind of stuff. Then the SBDC usually has classes that you can go to, all those things, right? And so this is to get some of that knowledge that we'll need as startup founders. Okay, so now Mike's like, whoa. Tell me how this thing works again. So Janice is like, all right. So remember, this is like your New York map, right? So in New York, you have like, or any map, right? You have all these roads, right? And the roads connect with other roads, and they connect with buildings and points of interest and all that other kind of stuff. And Mike's like, okay, I understand that. So Janice is like, well, think about these parts right here, these circles and these squares. Think about these as people, right? So instead of roads and points of interest, these are people. And the lines that are in between them are actually established relationships. So if we look at this right here, we say StartupSac is connected to a lot of different nodes right here, right? So we kind of follow the line, and we see that StartupSac runs or curates Startup Happy Hour. They curate StartupSac office hours. They're involved with Startup Digest. They curate that. And so you can have a look at all the different relationships that people have and how their programs kind of manifest like throughout the ecosystem. Okay. So Mike's like, all right, I think I might get a handle on this. I think I can do this. And she's like, Janice is like, yes, just remember what you're looking for is your mentors, teachers, peers, connections with potential customers, and eventually, yeah, you do get to the money, folks, but that map will help you like kind of navigate through all of that. And so Mike's like, okay, so if I get this straight, this was my plan beforehand. My plan before was, all right, I have an idea, I need to pitch it to somebody to get some funding, and then after that, then I'll get a co-founder, and then we'll start working on finding a market for it after it's built and everything. And after talking to you, maybe my plan looks a little different now. And Jesus is like, tell me. And Mike's like, okay, well, I think what I'm going to do first is learn about startup stuff. And then I'm going to try to meet some folks, do some networking, see if anybody else is interested in my project and changing the world the way I think it should be changed. And then after that, once we're ready, then maybe we'll do some funding stuff. And she's like, yeah, you know what, Mike? I like your plan. Right? So basically Mike says, okay, I'm going to start here. I'm going to see who I can meet. I'm going to see like, oops. I'm going to see who I can meet. I'm going to see what I can learn, fill in some knowledge gaps. At the same time, I'm going to network and I'm going to go to some of these events so I can find some folks, right? And then after that, then I'll be ready with like a pitch deck to start like applying to accelerators, incubators, and then that gives me to the introductions that I need in order to talk with the funding folks. Right? So, okay, at this point, what I would like to do is I would like to take a second to look at some comments here in the chat. And let's see, while we're doing this, or while I'm taking a moment here, I'd like to hear from everybody else. How's this sitting with you before we go into an example of what a typical founder's journey looks like? I'm also going to give you a break from my voice. If I have any questions, let's see here.
So I think a lot of the questions, Dan, were so far about the map, and I think April asked how it was made. It's I answered her there. It's a custom made in Adobe Illustrator with some basically simple JavaScript on the back end to make it interactive.
Nice. I like Joe's comment. We don't need roads.
Dan, I have a question to you, please.
Yes.
Sorry, I came in late here, but I just wanted to pitch you. How the idea of the mapping come up? Like, is there like a methodology? Is there a book, like a guide to get started? I understand the map that is organic. It's locally here, it's locally there. But I wanted to see like what was the path of the planning, the thinking of that.
Well, so it's funny you ask the question because I'm actually writing an article about this right now. But a lot of ecosystems, Sacramento, whether you're in Brazil or wherever you are, a lot of entrepreneurs just simply don't know what resources are available to them. There's a lot of resources in communities all over the world. And a lot of times the entrepreneurs in that community don't know about them. They're unaware of them, or they may know about them, but they're not sure which one is best for them. So a lot of ecosystem builders, what we are, decide to kind of map out and make visible and accessible all the resources in the community. So that's kind of the impetus for this. I was curious.
I love the idea that because it's so lean, like it's just so straightforward. Because I was reading this book here, like the Global Silicon Valley, and it fits like in several places and yours is beautiful. I mean, like
Thank
I
you.
can see from here going there, and then like what can I do for homework, etc., etc., etc. It's
Yeah.
very
Yep.
beautiful.
Yep. So yeah, so thanks for the comment. And yeah, a lot of people do it differently. There's different versions and ways of doing it, but yeah, it's all about making things accessible to the entrepreneur. Did anybody have any questions about Dan's story? I think we're good to go. Dan, if you want to resume?
Yeah. Okay. So, thanks, Vitor. Thanks for asking that question, engaging with us. We think it's a cool map. We think it's basically there to help us. Actually, at the end of the day, it's all about connecting with other people, right? And getting people to help us so that we can help the rest of the world, right? And so at this point, let's have a look at what a typical founder's journey can actually look like inside of the ecosystem. So I'm going to share my screen again, and we're gonna go back to Mike and Janice. They're maybe down at Old Soul, maybe they're like in Shine Cafe or something like that downtown, and they're talking about their plans and everything like that. And Janice is, she's a little bit ahead of Mike, and Mike's like just learning everything he can from her. So of course, there's always somebody that knows something more than you, right? In like that later that in their session, in walks this other person, Beth, and her co-founder. And Janice is like, Beth, I haven't seen you in ages. And Beth is a little further along in her journey as a startup. Her startup's name is Aver. And what Aver does is it tells stories about historical events from multiple points of view, right? She was like, I got to do this. And so she's been through the ecosystem. And Janice is like, Janice knows this. And she's like, hey, can we buy a cup of coffee? And you could tell us a little bit about your journey. And she's like, yeah, it's great. This is what we do, right? Janice, nice to see you again. Nice to meet you, Mike. I know what you're doing here. Let me tell you how it worked for me. So like, cool. So Beth says the first thing that she did in building Aver was she had this idea, right? And she was like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start going to basically 1 million cups. Great place to start meeting people that are in entrepreneurship. They're just like you, so you don't have to like feel so alone. You go to Startup Happy Hour where you can actually start like listening to people in their journeys and everything like that. And she's like, that really helped out. Like, not only was I not alone, but I started meeting folks that told me, hey, this is what your next step ought to be, right? And Beth is like, that really helped. And oh, by the way, if you want to know more about these things and what these actual nodes are, again, you can click on each one right here, but then you can also look here at the legend on top. It basically says programs and resources. It basically tells you like what those little circles actually mean right at this point. So first thing is you look at the gray boxes, figure out where you're at and who you want to meet, and then you look at the little circles, and then the circles up in the legend will tell you, hey, okay, this is the node, and if you want to drill in, that's where you click in, right? Okay, so Beth says, yeah, I started going to events, started meeting folks, all that kind of stuff. And then the next thing that I did is I learned that I just didn't know everything that I needed to know about business. In fact, there was a couple of things I didn't know that I didn't know, right? She's like, that's the stuff that'll get you. So where do I find all this? Or where do I just start like exposing myself to like all these different things? And that's the educate line. So she went to the Lean Innovator series. She went to the virtual toolkit series. She went to some of the classes at the SBDC. And she started working with some of the different verticals, some of the different industries that from people that she met inside of the ecosystem. So for example, Clean Start has programs that are educational. Egg Start has programs that are educational. You can see those like how they're actually connected right there. And so Beth is like, okay, so when I met folks, they told me to go to certain, incubators or courses, that kind of thing in the ecosystem. And then after that, then I had a thing, right? And I could actually talk intelligently about my business in like 60 seconds or less. And that's when I started getting into accelerators. And Mike's like, okay, wait, I have a question. What's the difference between an incubator and an accelerator, right? And Beth is like, okay, incubator basically is for when you're like thinking about your idea, you don't have it like 100% set, and you need to like talk it out, you need to diagram it out, you need to test it out, and all this other kind of stuff, right? An accelerator, excuse me, an accelerator is when you actually kind of have a business already laid out. You have a business model, you got your plan, you got your some of the financials kind of like loosely hanging together, and then you go to Accelerator to basically like close some of those gaps, meet other people, and you're walking away with like this pitch deck that you're going to use to pitch other people and like investors and stuff like that later. He's like, oh, okay. So what are some of those accelerators that are in the area? And she says, well, there's the Big Bang, which I think is coming up. Laura mentioned, I think that's next week. Fourth Wave Accelerator, Founder Institute is another. Growth Factories actually has a cohort that's in operation right now. And so there's a bunch of different like accelerators that you can join and apply for that will help you get to that established business case, right? And Mike's like, okay, that makes sense. Janice is like, yeah, I'm feeling this. So what happened next? And Beth is like, well, I will tell you what happened next. After an accelerator, that's when I started getting my foot in the door into like getting in front of some investors and all that kind of stuff. And finally, what happened is once we started making some revenues and we started like making an impact and it like started to become a thing. That's when we got picked up in Comstocks, which is a local magazine in the capital region, that's in Sacramento, that talks about all things business insight, right? And so a lot of times what they'll do is they'll feature a startup of the month, and that's how you can get some good exposure there. So Beth was like, they got startup of the month, and that was awesome. Excuse me. Okay, so everybody's like super hyped about this. And now Mike is like, you know what? We're going to do this, and I know what to do now, and I'm really excited. And so if you're like Mike, basically, this is how you can start using this map, right? So you have this, I think it was pasted, the link to the map was actually pasted like inside of the chat. It's startupsac.com/SSE, right? Or you can go to startupsac.com, and you can see this thumbnail right over here. You just click on that, and that takes you right into the map. Oh, by the way, if you're looking to get started accessing this diagram right from your computer without having to go anywhere yet, I think what you do is you get into resources right here, and getting involved in the Sacramento startup community, where to start. So you click into that, right? And when you get there, it'll tell you, okay, so, gratuitous, hey, there's a video that kind of recaps all of what we talked about just now. There's a little bit of music there too, so it's not as like Dan heavy. And this is like the newsletter that goes around every week. This 1 million cups happens every week. Office hours, happy hour. These are like all these different things that you can do to start like jumping in with both feet into the ecosystem. No, by the way, if you don't have a thing yet, you're just thinking about a thing, you are invited, you are welcome, because none of us plans any of this out in a vacuum. Like, we all do this together. And so if you're looking at the ecosystem and you want to get started, those are some of the ways you can get started immediately. And then the other thing that you can do, like once you get your feet under you, you can say, okay, well, I got to learn some stuff, or I got to meet some more people, or I got to build stuff. You basically decide what it is that you want to do, what you feel like your next step is, or maybe a mentor tells you what your next step is or what they recommend. And you just come over to the map and you say, okay, well, maybe I need to start, in the educate line, or maybe I need to kind of look at, well, what are some of the accelerators that are in the area so I know how to, start putting my journey together. Now, there's one more thing that I want to show you, and then I'll be quiet, is not my calendar. What I want to show you is sometimes when you get into it, hey, look, I'm in a space with whiteboards, and the whiteboards fill up all the time, right? And I got to keep erasing them and writing on them, and it just gets to be a lot. Sometimes I just need to get out, right? And I need to talk to other people, and I need to be around other people's influence. And so where can I go and talk with my peers and all that kind of stuff? Well, if you come down here to all the way down to the bottom of the diagram where it says space, right? These are co-working spaces inside of the ecosystem. So Urban Hive is in Sacramento proper. Granite City is in Folsom. Haney is in Rockland. Coho's downtown. The Inner Grove is in Elk Grove, right? So all these places are places where you can meet people just like you. You can also go to the Carlson Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, who is represented here by many folks, and they are all about equipping you with the right knowledge and the connections that you need to take your startup forward. So at the beginning of your generosity, i.e. the point of the conversation where you're like, yeah, okay, I think I'll subject myself to Dan's comments for the next 25 minutes. Basically what we said is, hey, I was going to show you this map, and what this map will do is it'll show you where to find investors, where to start looking for co-founders, and where to start getting some education about business and startup stuff in general. And I was going to show you how to navigate that. And the way we did that is we looked at, we looked at the ecosystem from the eyes of a brand new entrepreneur, and we also looked at the ecosystem from a seasoned entrepreneur. And I kind of showed you the difference between what it looks like starting out and what it actually turns out to be as a, as a typical founder's journey. So I want to thank you for giving me your attention, and thank you for your questions. And thank you, Jeff and Laura, for allowing me to speak about this thing, because I just think it's cool. And yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
I wish everybody the best of luck. Thank you.
Thanks. That's awesome. And we want to open up to questions, but first I want to give some time to a couple of real live local Sacramento entrepreneurs. We've got a couple here who have agreed to share kind of their journey through the ecosystem. You saw Dan's hypothetical case with a couple of people. So I wanted to talk to, we've got AZ here with us. AZ is first the one I see on my screen right now. So I'm going to ask AZ to unmute. I'm going to add a spotlight to him. I'm going to keep you spotlight, Dan, just for the hell of it. So AZ, why don't you unmute yourself and tell us about your journey through the Sacramento ecosystem, how the educational resources, the connection resources, what ones you utilized and have helped you.
Sounds good, Jeff. So just some background from Sacramento, California, but chose to go to school to Sacramento State, had the entrepreneurial bug, was really interesting, just went to the library one day and then stumbled across, kind of mentioned throughout this whole workshop, the Carlson Center of Innovation Entrepreneurship. Kind of went in there, had some, I've always wanted to create something, was doing stuff in e-commerce, but was really, bewildered by the fact that resources are out there that are good and that are free. I actually got pulled into this one little sales call with this drop shipping / e-commerce course that was like $12,000. I was like, whoa, let's calm down. Let's find some free resources. Didn't know that they were out there. So first started out with the Carlson Center. They had a boot camp, took some ideas. I have multiple ideas that I've worked on the past 3 years being involved with the ecosystem, some being the boot camps that were originally at the Carlson Center, went through the first cohort that the Carlson Center had, being venture school. And then through that, I presented at 1 Million Cups twice. So I had 2 ideas that I brought into 1 Million Cups, got a bunch of feedback from the community, met folks like Dan, Laura, things like that. Really cool. I did hang with Haney, which was a really interesting experience. I got to have like an hour and a half, sit down with Mark Haney, and then a couple of entrepreneurs. He shared his story, we shared ours. It was a really cool experience doing that. And then as everything transitioned virtually, it was, it was upsetting, but it was still really cool to connect with programs like the virtual toolkit series that I was a part of. Learned a bunch of different things. And now I'm the vice president of the entrepreneurship club here on campus. So it's been kind of a weird mix of things, right? You get to know and experience the resources yourself as an entrepreneur, but then as I'm connecting with other students, I'm kind of showing them the startup map and showing them where to go and things like that. So really helpful stuff and really important things that Dan has presented about. So, they taught me a bunch of valuable skills, all these different events to move my businesses forward. And I've met wonderful connections with people from the region, and I will continue to be a part of the region and the ecosystem and try to stay connected as much as I can. So that's pretty much my story, Jeff.
Awesome.
I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thanks, AZ. And so I'm going to welcome Chris Anderson to the screen. I've seen Chris at tons of events over the years. So Chris, why don't you kind of share your journey through the ecosystem, what you've taken advantage of?
Sure, Jeff. Yeah, and thanks for putting on the workshop today. Super happy to contribute. So, and before that, I just wanted to give a testament to StartupSac and the Carlson Center. You guys are 2 of the most impactful resources I found along my journey. So since you guys are hosting, I have to give you the due credit. So my journey kind of started a couple years ago. I grew up in Roseville and went from Roseville High School to Sierra College without knowing about all these resources at the time. I needed a way to pay for my 4-year education. So I started a business going door to door cleaning garbage cans as an 18-year-old. I did that for a couple of years, ultimately with a goal to go to UC Santa Barbara. That's where I transferred to after a couple of years, graduated from there in 2018. Upon going to UCSB, I realized, man, I mean, your network is everything. And I had never really tapped into my local Sacramento, Roseville area network. So that was my goal number one at coming home upon graduating, continuing to run that business that I started as an 18-year-old, was coming home, getting mentorship, getting connections, as a really green 21-year-old kid at the time. So I started to look up, entrepreneurial resources near me. Who came first? StartupSac. So got connected right away from StartupSac through 1 Million Cups and some of the kind of programs you guys are affiliated with. I kind of segmented the things I've been involved into 3 different camps, both personal and student services, which is the name of my business, and then Raves, another business that is a business that I ended up joining along my journey. So upon coming home, I started to go to Startup Weekend, the Startup Weekend SAC, both as a participant and a volunteer, which has been a great networking opportunity and a great way to meet mentors, especially people that are looking to pay it forward locally. Did some co-working at places like Studio Roseville. I see Jeff Sakala on this call. Granite City Folsom with Kyle Middleton. StartupSac, obviously met Laura and Jeff through that. Clean Start, because I have an interest in clean technology. So kind of met Thomas Hall and Gary Simon through that organization, attending some of their events and programs. Haney Biz has been a great networking opportunity too. I think Haney, Mark Haney, and I think some of the affiliates are on the call, Monique too. So wonderful networking opportunity, kind of on a personal level. For my business that I started as an 18-year-old, some of the most impactful resources I found were the Small Business Development Center. Ultimately, that's probably the most vital portion of my business growth has been due to getting connected with a business coach through the Small Business Development Center. It's tax funded, super, awesome program, free to get coaching or attend workshops. So a wonderful organization. Already mentioned StartupSac. Also attended the Lean Innovator series with Dan on this call. So thanks for contributing your time to continue to grow the startup ecosystem in Sacramento. Upon coming home and trying to get mentorship, I looked up some programs near me, as kind of I alluded to, and found the Sacramento Entrepreneurship Academy, which, as was mentioned earlier, it's about a semester long, 6 months or so program. I think mine was 5 months. Great way to get some mentorship, grow your network. I know I was the youngest person in my cohort, and ranged from 20-year-old UC Davis students to seasoned 60-year-old executives. It seemed like in that cohort of 20. So that was a great way. Ultimately, that's how I found my business partner. We've done some other things through that venture, 1 Million Cups, participated in UC Davis programs, Big Bang, UC Mentors, UC Entrepreneurship Academy. Actually did the Spark Venture Competition, which I think is coming up in a couple days through the Carlson Center. Also the Tech Futures Group, I see that somewhere on the map too. And eventually, funny enough, as part of Dan's story, Comstock Startup of the Month, we got that honor at some point in our journey too. So just tapped into so many of these amazing resources thanks to discovering the subway map and attending events, putting yourself out there. So just thanks to everyone on this call. I noticed a lot of you guys from a lot of these organizations I kind of name dropped. So thanks for having me.
Thanks for sharing that, Chris. And I want to second what Chris shared there in AZ and recognize other ecosystem partners here. Cameron Law is here, and let's just scrolling through. Jeff Sakala is here, and Monique is here, and Jesse Becker Alexander. So we've got a lot of great resources here who are providing resources in the community. So I think at this point, what we'll do is we'll open it up to questions. If anybody has questions about resources available in the community that you have questions about, or you have a need and you're wondering what might be a good fit for you, then feel free to ask, and I'll invite Monique and Cameron to jump into if they have answers to that, or if you have kudos or something you want to give a shout out to that you've enjoyed in the ecosystem, we can do that too. So we'll open it up to the audience. Nobody? And I'm going to unpin the spotlight. Anybody?
Well, I mean, I can ask a question.
Okay, Go ahead, go for it.
Okay, so let's say that just hypothetical situation. Oh, and then I'll step aside. Actually, Victor has a question. So let's listen to his, and then
I think it's my Brazilian blood that wants to scream out loud. But putting this beside and putting to the topic as well. Like, do you offer or do you have any easier way like to get started from abroad? I mean, like, I'm Brazilian, I don't have the working visa, the working permit there, or how does it work for someone who's a Latino down the border, because below the border, because here in Brazil we have a lot of opportunities, but also I think sometimes we don't engage with the right people as well.
Well, I would say, if you're looking for resources to help you run your entrepreneurial journey, a lot of the same things will apply to you there, like the lean startup methodology and things like that that Dan teaches through Lean Innovator are applicable, just as applicable in Brazil as they are here. So I think that there's resources you can find online, and you can even, Dan, if you want to throw your website into the chat to share that with them, I think that would be awesome. We've actually seen in our events, we've seen people coming from all over the world since, due to COVID, we've gone virtual. So we had, just the other night, we had somebody visiting us from Thailand at our happy hour event. So by all means, if you want to take advantage of the resources here in the community, and they're virtual, feel free to join. And you can do that by, the best way is to sign up for the Startup Digest, and you can see all the events that are coming up. Dan or Lori, anything else to add to that?
Thank you.
Well, I think Victor meant more like him moving to our region to start business. Was that part of your question?
Yeah, it could be.
You want to move to Sacramento?
The weather there is wonderful as well.
And I'm not sure I have the answer to that question. Cameron, was there something in the international seminar today that would address like people wanting to immigrate here to start businesses?
Not to necessarily set up shop. That was going to be my answer, was happy to connect you to the World Trade Center of Northern California. I think they'd be a great resource in navigating that part of the journey. And then just from the experience, we had a couple Brazilians that had been a part of one of our toolkit series, and they were looking to file a patent here in the US so they could have a connection here. So I've connected them to the US PTO office that we're connected with. So I think just kind of continuing to stay plugged in and following that map to a degree in terms of registering here and coming here. Obviously COVID's a core part of that limitation at the time being. So.
We do have a couple of new questions rolling in on the chat. I think the first one is from Alicia asks, is there a place you would recommend to go find out how business taxes work? So if you start a business, you don't make a mistake with the IRS. And I'll open that up to Dan, Laura, Cameron, Monique, but I think the SBDC might be a good place to start with that.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, Jeff. So Alicia, I put some links there. capitalregionsbdc.com is a place where you can go to at least start asking those questions, right? So they give classes on business basics, business model canvas. Actually, I give those classes. And they're basically talk about like entities and all that kind of stuff. Now, for specific questions like a certified public accountant or a tax preparer will probably answer those things, but you can get like the basics, understanding it at those organizations there.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, and I was going to mention also the Women's Business Center has classes around taxes as well.
I am remiss and did not list them also. So yeah, that's capital CA. I'll get the link.
It's on the map.
It is on the map. Yes, you just have to find it. Next question, from Zach. Any resources that provide info on how to find or meet developers that would be willing to join a startup? Yes, there are a lot of actual tech meetups in in the Sacramento region. And Laura, you know the Slack community. I wonder if that would be a good one to share. I'm going to pull up the map and point something out here. Let me share my screen.
So first, let me ask you, are you looking for someone to join your team and build your app for free with a future promise of equity? Or are you looking to hire a developer? Because most of them want to be hired, to be honest with you. Although if they're really aligned with your idea, they might be willing to join as a co-founder and do it for equity. But the best way, again, is networking with the people in those communities. And on Meetup, there's a lot of tech meetups happening in Sacramento. There's also a like a social Slack channel called Sac Tech. I don't know if we have that on the.
I've got so on the map, you'll see over in kind of the lower portion of it over on the right side, there's things that kind of sort of fit but are kind of different, like tech meetups, networking meetups, and workforce development groups. So if you click on tech meetups, it actually takes you to a page on our website which lists a bunch of the different tech meetups and networking meetups in the region. So, you know, there's a group about all things, and not all of these are still active. COVID really kind of shut a lot of these down, but there are a few of these that are active. So I would say check that out as one good place to start. All right, hope that helped. Looking to build an MVP to then raise capital.
I think that's related to the tech.
Yeah. Let's see. So let's see.
I have another recommendation.
Go for it.
Yeah. And so like if you start going to some of the co-working spaces, like you might find some folks that that are interested in all that, right? So you can find best way to get into this. You look at co-working spaces as like little like mini communities within the community, right? Each of the co-working spaces has its own flavor. It's also got some of the same, you know, like, you know, birds of a feather, right? They flock together. So like, for example, if you go to Hacker Lab, you'll find a lot of people that are artists, but they're also makers, right? So getting like some prototypes, especially if it's hardware. Internet of Things is a great place, or Hacker Lab is a great place to get started with Internet of Things. If you go to Granite City, you'll find a lot of folks that are kind of more in like the tech scene there. Roseville, you'll have people that are in tech, but I think it's more. Yeah, help me out here, Joe. We're dealing with you know, like compliance businesses, right? So okay, so shout out to Joe. He's a fintech compliance startup, right? And so you'll find folks like in different co-working spaces like that. And so how do you get involved in them? Well, you show up, right? And you ask, hey, what are some of the events that you have as a co-working space? Let me join those. And then you can network in those, you know, those spaces and get to know people, collaborate with some other people on their projects first. Let people know who you are. Networking by helping, right? That's a really great way to start building trust and relationships in the greater community and also in like those little communities. So.
Yeah. So, Jackie, were you going to answer more on that one, or can I move to the next?
Go for it. Go for it.
So Jackie's asked, what's the best way to get into UC Davis Agricultural Technology Network as a non-alum? On our map, you'll find an organization called AgStart. It's agstart.org, and they're located in Woodland, which is just, if I get my directions right, east of Davis?
Just northeast of Davis.
Northeast of Davis. And AgStart is a nonprofit that focuses on agricultural technology startups and helping them advance. And they're very connected to UC Davis as well. So I would recommend starting with AgStart. Also, there are events and things that happen at UC Davis around ag. Again, participating in events. UC Davis has started to do in-person events as well. So that would be my recommendation.
I see people are throwing in the chat lots of nodes that I've broken links to them, so I'll need to check those out.
So
Okay,
I
we've
guess
got
there's some work to do.
yeah, we've got time for a few more questions. 5 more minutes, and then we'll wrap it up, unless there are no more questions.
Let's blame the Lean Innovator and the toolkit on Carlson Center. I think they've updated their website recently, so the links that we had may no longer be working.
Yeah. So I'll do this for those who this what you saw today with Dan's presentation was a live version. Dan did a video for us, I think just published a month or two ago. So if you go to that page that I just put into the chat, that kind of Dan covered that page already, but it kind of gives a listing of resources of how to get started in the community, and it includes a embedded YouTube video of basically what he did today. So if you missed it, feel free to watch that. As you see, this is being recorded. We're recording this right now, so we'll have this out within a week or so you can rewatch this too. Let's see, if you need assistance with capital, how do you know what percentage of the business you would need to give up? Laura, you want to handle that one?
Yeah, that question is so very specific to your startup, where you're at, what kind of fundraising you want to do, what level of fundraising you're at. There's no one answer, fits all. So, and in the very early stages of fundraising, you may even use a note or something like that, where you're not actually giving equity away at that point. But if you're super early stage, you don't even know what the value of your company is yet. So there's a lot of content on the StartupSac website and the Startup Grind website. We did a happy hour discussion with investors on seed investing not too long ago.
Yeah, I just put that in chat, actually.
Yeah, you're not going to find, nobody's going to throw out a number for you.
Yeah,
so you have to decide what you're willing to give up, and then find a way to fund yourself based on that. But the less you give away, the better, particularly early stage. Some people are so desperate for money, they'll like give away 50% of their company just to get some money to build something. And that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, but the good news is they're like, so sometimes what we hear is we hear stories of people that raised funding and they built the thing and it took off and everything like that. But there are a lot of different stories where folks start a thing and it starts making money relatively soon, and you can bootstrap. Basically, it's called bootstrapping, because you're pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, right? And there's a lot of stories like that also, and so that's the good news, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, it looks like Tori's posted a link she's found useful. And I want to say that's one way how you learn stuff too, is by hanging out with other entrepreneurs who can share their resources. Not everything's going to be on our map, but people can tell you what helped them.
Looks like we have another question in the chat. We'll call this our last question. I'm not sure who to throw this out to, but Ivan asks, any tips for first-year MBA student? If you went through an MBA program, what do you wish you would have done differently to help you prepare?
Yeah.
Laura, Cameron, Monique, Dan, any advice there?
I think it's kind of beyond the scope of the startup resource. So, maybe there's an MBA forum that somewhere in the region that would have those kinds of answers.
Dan has
I could share. So one of the things, so Steve Blank says, the definition of a startup is a group of people searching for a repeatable business model. And I like to say, well, the definition of a business is a group of people that are operating a repeatable business model. And so there's a big difference between the skills that you employ as a startup founder and as a person that's in a business, right? And so what I find is that the MBA programs are really, really great for teaching you processes, operations, roles, responsibilities, finances, all those like things that you're going to need to employ in a business that's actually operating already. A lot of the programs that we talk about right here are on that earlier stage where we're basically, how do you actually search for a repeatable business model, right? Like, how do you understand how to get customers? How do you understand how to dig into their problems and know it's a problem and get proof of those problems and all that other kind of stuff, right? That's mostly what we do as a community as a whole. I can mention the Sac State Organization of Executive MBAs. That's OEMBA. I think you have to be an alum, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But I know that, yeah, OMBA is definitely a okay, repeatable and scalable. You're right, Diane. Thank you. OEMBA is definitely an organization, where you can draw on some of that past experience there. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan.
Hope I addressed that appropriately.
Good input. Okay, so I think we're going to wrap this up. Thank you again to Dan for sharing all your knowledge and awesome presentation skills with this. And thank you everybody for coming. Just to